it's a video, and it's actually a video of what I would call a performance piece. The pieces themselves I consider to be able to stand alone. The piece that I call Blood Iron or Clothes Clothesline, they are pieces that could hang in the gallery on their own, and I actually did enter them in this show. And so the video was accepted as part of the show. And the video in and itself is a completed piece. And it's the only video that I've ever done which in and of itself is a completed video. The others are mostly videos of my performances. So I was very pleased that it was accepted in the show, but that's really what it is. The work looks feminist piece, but it didn't come out of that intellectual process. For me, my work always comes out of something that I just simply see in my head, and it usually comes out of a gut feeling. And I think that that's the way that a lot of women work, as opposed to men who work more out of an intellectual process. It relates very much to the feelings that I had about my mother when I was a child at about 8 years old, and my association with her giving her blood and guts to housework as opposed to her artwork, because she's also an artist. And I could see this strain and anxiety and tension in her, and it seemed to me to be a painful process. So it comes out to be a feminist piece in the sense that it comes from that place, and we all as women, that's something that we struggle from. But that was not my intent. I just saw this and I created it, and when it was done I said, oh, gee, that looks like this and that looks like that, and other people say it looks like this and it looks like that, and so on, and give me their information after it's finished. My estimation is that about 10 men to 1 woman have been represented in galleries and in history and everywhere forever, within my experience, except for certain media. My background is dance, and I also have a lot of experience in what would be fabric art, which really is more dominated. Both of those are more dominated by women at this point. So my personal experience is that I've experienced a lot of other women, but I'm always really frustrated when I go into a gallery and all the work on the wall, the work of men, and I like to just walk out then. This is my response. Where is the work of women in your gallery?
There's the title of the piece, and it's called Housewares. And it came out of a series of individual pieces of artwork. One called Blood Iron, which is I believe the first piece you see in the video. The second one is called Hangover. No, pardon me, the second one is called Clothesline, and that's in the bathroom in the scene. And the third one is called Hangover, and that's in the bedroom. And the fourth one is called Chair. I decided to make a video of it and go through that process because I was using the video mostly as documentation, but this was really my first video where I felt like it was a video. It had a kind of a storyline to it. I moved through the space. The video camera was not just set up in front of us. Originally I had a performance piece, and I invited friends over, and we had cookies and tea, and I ran around and serving tea and cookies to everyone, and then I went through the performance piece and people walked through the apartment. These are just visions that I have, and the piece that's in the show, in the video, that's called Blood Iron, for instance, was something that I just envisioned in my mind, and it comes from my mother when I was about 8 years old. I had a real sense that she was giving up her life to her housework. She was also an artist, that somehow she was really under a lot of stress, and she was giving up her life and her blood and her heart. They are all visions that come from my mother from when I was 8 years old, and they just come full-blown in my head, and then I put them together, and then other people see what's in them. Or I saw that afterwards when I looked at the video, I said, oh my God, that looks like whatchamacallit, and this looks like that, and this feels like this and that, because people say, oh, that's a feminist piece based on something or other, and what concept did you come on from, and where did this take place, and how did you derive this from that? And I did none of that. It's all visual for me. It all comes from my guts. My background is dance, modern dance. I started when I was 6 years old, and visual art, sculpture specifically. I got into fabric sculpture around in the early 70s. My mother is a sculptor, and she worked with a variety of media, including fabric. And my grandmother was also a dancer and a visual artist as well. Both my mother and my grandmother are huge influences on me. I was actually interviewed for something else, and somebody said, who was my most influential artist? And I think of putting my mother and my grandmother in there, and both of my aunts. At the time, because I always assume they're talking about, well, some big name person out there that we don't know. My grandmother was born around the turn of the century, and she was a great follower of Isadora Duncan. And she started dancing, and in those days, polite women didn't do that, and she took off her skirt and cut off her bloomers and started dancing in the backyard, and she was about 16 years old. She was the same age as Martha Graham, so that in those days there were about 6 dancers running around, and Martha Graham was one of them, and my grandmother was one of them, and there were a few other pioneers. I like things that are human and non-human, that there's sort of a fine line between reality and non, what is not real. So the chair is an example of that kind of thing. I'm really excited about making videos, because you can put them on television and people can watch them. And when you make a video, when you do a performance piece, you can get some people there some of the time, and most of them are somewhere else. And my favorite situations for performing my performance pieces are in natural settings, pre-existing settings, rather than in a theater situation, so that you get people walking by store windows or on the ocean, and something is just happening out there, and they had no idea that it was going to be going on out there.